quickly run you through, because obviously I will have plumbed up because it's a bit time consuming, but initially when you are plumbing up on the pole, you need to have a selection of plummets with you when you're paste fishing. The only reason for that is purely to find the depth of the silt. Now, it's all well and good fishing with a silt plummet, but sometimes with paste, especially when there's a lot of fish in your peg, what will happen is they'll actually burrow into the silt, and if it's a very soft bottom on the lake, you can end up with a change in depth as the session goes on, because you're looking for a lot of activity in the peg of up to sort of 2, maybe 3 inches in some cases. And what you need to do at the start of the session is identify how deep the silt is, so you know as the session progresses as to why your float's sinking, as I say, because the peg can get deeper. So I always carry a selection of plummets ranging from 10 grams right up to 30, and what I start with is a nice heavy, fairly thin 30 gram plummet, and I'm dropping that in as heavy as I can, and I'll sort of demonstrate that now. The reason behind that is I'm looking to try and get that plummet to actually bed into the silt to tell me how deep the silt is, and also it'll give you a truer reading of the contours of the lake bed. Again, when you're chucking a 10 gram plummet around, because it'll sit on sort of rocks and various bits of debris on the bottom, you're not going to get the truest reading. So the reason for a 30 gram plummet gives you the truest reading of depth, and it also tells you how deep the silt is. As I say, I've already plumbed up these rigs, so it's no fluke that they're absolutely bang on. And it's one thing that when you're paste fishing you have to spend plenty of time doing is plumbing up. So like I say, ship out to about 12.5 metres and line up with a far bank marker. Again, a nice small far bank marker, so like I say, I'm bang in line with where I want to be. And you can see there, once the float's settled, that's how I've got it dotted down to an absolute pimple. Because the bristle's nice and thick on these frenzy floats, what you basically got then is you've got plenty of buoyancy there, so you don't need to have plenty of bristle showing for it to pull effectively against the paste and give a decent bite registration. So as you can see, that's how I've plumbed up there. But what I do when I'm plumbing up is drop the plummet in and make sure that I've got basically the plummet's got plenty of time to accelerate through the water to bed into the silt. And one thing that you'll be able to feel rather than see is when you're pulling against the plummet, just how much it sticks in the bottom. You can see there, it just sticks ever so slightly. So the lake bed there actually isn't that silty by comparison to a lot of venues that you'll fish, but there's a decent bit of silt there, probably I'd say maybe ½ an inch deep, something like that. So as the session goes on, I might have to deepen off by ½ an inch, possibly an inch if I get a load of fish in the peg. Once I've plumbed up with a 30 gram plummet, which is obviously way heavier than the piece of paste that you're going to be using, what I then do is switch from that to a 10 gram plummet, and this is going to sit on top of the silt for the time being and mimic the actual weight of the paste that you're going to be using. So again, say if you're using really small bits of paste, it might be worth using, say, an SSG shot to imitate it. You can see a much smaller plummet, and what you might be able to just see on the camera is when I plumb up in line with my far bank marker again, is the float will sit ever so slightly higher, and as I say, that's purely because it's not bedding into the silt as much. And this is the point when you're adjusting your float to get it to sit perfectly for when the paste is on the actual hook, when you're actually fishing with it. As you can see there, just lower that in, and you can see the float sits probably, like say, ½ an inch, maybe ¼ of an inch higher in the water, and that's perfect for what we're wanting to do with the paste today. Again, like I say, when you're plumbing up with a 30 gram, find the depth of the silt and the contours of the lake bed, then put on a 10 gram plummet or a lighter plummet, and that's where you set your depth in terms of where you want the float to sit when you're actually fishing with the paste. So it's a little bit more time consuming than the usual way of plumbing up, but it's absolutely crucial to make sure that you've always got the correct tension of line between the float and the paste, and equally making sure that you've not got too much bristle showing where you're going to end up missing loads of bites and pulling out the paste, but equally you don't want too little brittle showing so you can't really see it, and it's just going under at the slightest indication. So as I say, you've got to take your time to set that bristle right, but once you've got it, then like I say, it'll mean that you're foul hooking less fish and ultimately hitting more bites and putting more weight in your net. So as I say, that's plumbing up covered. In terms of marking that on the pole then, this is really important then, because you don't want your float to move. As I've already mentioned at the start, nice tight float rubbers to make sure it stays where it is. But I mark at every point I can on the float in terms of where that refers to on the top kit. So in terms of the top of the bristle, the base of the bristle and the base of the float. And then one thing that I always do, and I mentioned on the other rig as well, is I've put a number 10 shot, not a stot. That's crucial because shot don't move on the line like stots do, right beneath the float, and that'll basically tell me immediately if that float's moved. So say if it's only a 1/4 inch like that, I can look at it and say, rather than having to look to the reference point on the pole where it sort of looks like ballpark figure, I know exactly how much that float's moved. So it's just a case of moving that back down to the shot like so. I know then that my float's sat absolutely perfectly and I'm ready to fish again. Obviously when you're catching big fish, that's when your float can move up and down the line. So it's important that you use as many reference points on your pole to make sure that you're always bringing the float back and basically saving your time at the end of the day. Again, meaning you're spending more time out there rather than faffing around having to re-plumb. So like I say, that's plumbing of paste done. And that's, like I say, pretty much it really. Paste comes down to the area of the peg that you choose to fish, the plumbing up, and then the preparation of the bait itself. Once you've got all those right, it's fairly straightforward.